Good evening. Welcome this evening to the Heart of Westland Mission Community Roadshow. The first one this evening. I'm Stephen Radford, and it's a warm welcome to Appleby Methodist Church. I say it's a warm welcome with all the doors open. It does feel not quite the same, doesn't it? But it's good to see you. This is the first of our roadshows, and this evening we're looking at money. It's money, then mission, then resources, and then working together. It's looking at how a single mission community, embracing all of us, could work together. And tonight is about shaping the mission community's future, about what it might look like and how we might operate. We're actually asking those who are here very much to contribute to the ideas and the ways forward. It's not a set thing that we're going to do. We're actually open very much to the ideas. So we're open also to God's work in this place. And we seek open hearts and open minds from each and every one of you to listen to what God's saying, but we hear each other in what God is saying to us at this time. We focus on what God is doing. As we seek to obey God's will, I'm going to lead us in a short time of prayer and Bible reading. But first of all, I'd like you just to turn around to somebody nearby, not the person you came with, and just say good evening. Okay, from Be Still, the third verse, and this is as a prayer. Be still, for the power of the Lord is moving in this place. He comes to cleanse and heal, to minister his grace. No work too hard for him. In faith, receive from him. Be still, for the power of the Lord is moving in this place. And from 2 Corinthians 9, remember this, writes Paul, whoever sows sparingly will also reap sparingly. Whoever sows generously will also reap generously. Each person should give what they've decided in their heart to give, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. God is able to make all grace abound to you, so that in all things, at all times, having all that you need, you will abound in every good work. As it's written, he scattered abroad his gifts to the poor. His righteousness endures forever. Now he who supplies seed to the sower and bread for food will also supply and increase your store of seed, and will enlarge the harvest of your righteousness. You'll be made rich in every way, so that you can be generous on every occasion. And through us, your generosity will result in thanksgiving to God. The bit that really speaks to me is the alls. There's 4 of them, which is a Methodist thing, but I won't go into that tonight. There are alls there. For God is able to make all grace abound. You get the sense of God's generosity to us in our lives and forgiveness. So that in all things, at all times, in other words, in every place, in everything that we do, God is there to supply our needs. It's asking, it's seeking that vision and moving forward, to abound in every good work, at all times having all that you need. I don't know about you, but I don't often feel like that I've got all that I need. But most often the things I need are patience when I'm driving my car. But more seriously than that, grace and time seem short at the moment in this post-COVID world. Compassion is something else that we could do with a lot of. But tonight we're here to talk about God's resources for us. I led the Harvest Festival at Brough, and we were reflecting on God's generosity. When we have a vision from God, then God provides all that is needed. A vision for our mission. Let us pray. Almighty God, we meet this night in your holy presence. Gracious Father, we're aware of the abundance of your grace. Jesus, you are guest and host. May our gathering be a safe space where all are valued and welcomed. Jesus, friend and brother, help us to practice the hospitality that you revealed in your communion. And you who washed the disciples' feet, teach us afresh the sacrament of service. For you are a gracious giver. Reveal to us once again the abundance of your love, where we see scarcity. Open our hearts and minds to the call of salvation in your name. When you call each and every one of us to the kingdom banquet. So let us take that invitation to every street, every corner, every home, every house, every community. And Jesus, you prayed that we might be one, as you and the Father and the Spirit are one. We pray for that unity and that purpose tonight. May the unity of your church reveal your grace and love to all our communities. And we thank you for your creation, for your love, and for all that you give to us in Jesus Christ. And in his name we pray this prayer. Amen. So I have the task then of simply saying to you, good evening, and I'm Stephen Radford. I'm the Superintendent Minister of the Kirkby Stephen Appleby and T-Bay Circuit. Just sat in front, our technical man, who's going to give you a little wave. Enthusiastically is Andrew Sterling, my colleague, who is based here in Appleby but covers the other part of the circuit. I'm also part of the mission community team. I do a number of jobs nationally for the Methodist Church, but also across this area. But it's a great pleasure to invite the other two folks who are going to be leading this with me to introduce themselves.
Thank you. Try again. Evening, everyone. Hello, lovely to see you. There's some familiar faces and some new faces, which is lovely, and some faces I haven't seen for ages, which is great. So it's really nice to see you. So I'm Sue Wigley. In an official capacity, I am Appleby Deanery Lay Chair, and I am also a trustee on the Diocesan Board of Finance. During my working day, I work for a charity, and I suppose this evening I'm here as part of the Interim Steering Group. It's lovely to see you all, and while Steve and myself and Stuart, who'll introduce himself in a second, we're here to lead tonight's sessions and to facilitate your discussion. So there'll be some talking from us, but we're hoping there'll be lots of debate from the floor as well. So lovely to see you all. Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Stuart Fife. I'm the vicar of a group of 8 parishes between in the countryside, between here and Shap, most of the countryside in between there. I'm also the Anglican Rural Dean, so I oversee our local deanery. And I'm also the initial mission community leader as we try to get things off the ground, not necessarily looking for that job for life, but at least for now, helping us to lead the early stages of the mission community. Also, you'll see on the slide, to introduce the Mission Community Interim Steering Group. So when we were 2 mission communities, we had a little mission community council for the mission community that had been launched, and there was a sort of steering group for the mission community that hadn't yet launched, that was going to be in the south of the circuit in the deanery. When we agreed to move to 1 mission community, those groups were no longer appropriate or representative. It all got a bit lopsided. So we've drawn together a little interim group whose sole function really is to host these discussions so that together we find the kind of shape of mission community that we want for the longer term. So they are very much a sort of short-term group aimed at bringing us all together to have the conversation about what we really want long term. So there are 1 or 2 faces here from that group. There's Clive Hicks at the back, who might even wave at us, and Glenda here, the circuit steward, and I did see another somewhere, but I've misplaced. You know, there's somebody else that I've missed. No, maybe I haven't. Anyway, and you'll meet other members of the team at the future roadshows. So that's just to explain what that little group is and what they do. Sue, over to you to explain what we're going to be doing over the course of the roadshows.
Thanks, Andrew, if you could. Thank you. So we've got 4 roadshows, 4 workshops. And what we've done is what we've tried to do. They're not geographically or regionally worked out. It's very much contextual. So they've all got a different area to look at. So this evening, it's money. So this evening, we're going to be looking at a financial context and thinking about a CIO. And that might be a new thing for some people, charitable incorporated organisation. But we'll look into that. So tonight is looking at what finances we have in our area, in our mission community. We then have next week, next Wednesday, I believe, the 22nd of September, which is at Kirby Stephen Methodist Church, date for your diary. That one is about mission. And I think Clive and his colleagues will be leading on that one. And that's looking at, once we've worked out about the money, what are our priorities? What are our key themes that we want to look at in our mission community? And it will be based very loosely on our 4 themes, which is the God for All strategy, which is follow daily, speak boldly, care deeply, and tread gently. So that evening, we'll be looking at what is already happening in the area, so we don't have to replicate stuff, or maybe some things that we're not doing that we'd like to do. So that's an opportunity to have a real good think about, what do I want church to be? What could it be in my area? So that's mission. And then on the 13th of October, that's at Moreland Village Hall, that's all about resourcing. So we know what we want to do with our priorities, and we know what money hopefully we've got in the pot. So this is about budget setting and accountability to achieve our goals. So this is about what are our priorities? Are there other ways we can lever in funds as well as the traditional methods? Because as we know, our church size is declining in a lot of areas. So that's about being imaginative and innovative and thinking about things perhaps we could do differently. So that's about resourcing. So if you fancy coming along to that, then please join us on that one. And then finally, on the 20th of October, it's pretty good without my glasses, 20th of October, which is at T-Bay, and that's at the Methodist Church there. And that's all about agreeing our governance structures. So how's it actually going to work? Is the CIO the model we want to go for? Will it help us? Or are there other ways that we can perhaps work together? So as you can see, the 4 workshops are all very different, but there will be some overlap, and we'll try as best we can to stick to each area. That's the 4 workshops. Now, the format of each workshop, I'll just briefly go over that before we go into our first discussion. So hopefully you will have all seen a document like this. If you haven't, leave your email somewhere for me and I could get it emailed to you. It's called Resourcing Mission Communities, and it's a proposal to say this is how it might happen and this is how it might be able to work. It's had lots of consultations and rewrites. We're on version about 34, I think. But anyway, it was last looked at in April, so it's there for you to use as a resource, and that is what we're going to use as the format for all the workshops. We're not going to reinvent that. We've already got that paper, so it's about interrogating that and testing it really. So we're going to have the 4 workshops with the purpose is really to help everybody's understanding of what's going on and really to try and get people chatting and talking. Doesn't matter what you say, nothing is, however silly it might seem, you just air it, it's fine. And then the format for each workshop is we're going to have a brief introduction like this. There will be handouts, there'll be group work, and then at the end of the session, won't be too long, we should be done by 9 o'clock definitely, so we can all get home. There'll be a chance for everybody to have a plenary feedback. So that's the format for this evening. Is everybody okay with that? Brilliant. Right, I shall leave you in the capable hands of Stuart.
Now, the prevailing wisdom is that when you're heading into the unknown, as we are in church, you can't rely on experts to tell you where to go, because there are no experts. So the best way to find a way forward is to get as many people affected by it as possible involved in the process of, first of all, discerning what your problems and challenges are, and then together exploring a way forward. And that's exactly why we're having this series of roadshows. And that's exactly why we've invited all of you here tonight, why we're also recording it for YouTube for other members of the church who aren't able to be here today, and why we're hoping you'll carry this conversation back into your local churches. And it's very important that whatever we do as a group of churches, we actually start by trying to identify what the problems are and address the problems. We haven't got time and energy and resources to waste on just great ideas that don't address our problems. So our first task this evening is to put our heads together and think about these two key questions. What are the big challenges facing the church in our area? And what are the main opportunities facing the church in our area? Now, you've all got somewhere near you some pens and some post-it notes. And what we'd love you to do is to capture as many thoughts as you can on those post-it notes and hand them back to us, and we'll sort of feed some of those back and take them back into our feedback. What would be helpful is if you could discuss this in groups of between 2 and 4. And ideally, I think it would be great if you could talk to somebody who's included within your group, somebody who's not from your church, just so you get the perspective of somebody else from another place. And it'd be interesting to see what common themes emerge and what distinctive themes emerge. So you've got a bit of time now. You can turn around and introduce yourselves to each other, and do scribble away and try and capture as many of these thoughts as you can on your post-its. We'll sort of wander around and maybe collect the odd post-it as they get written down, so that we can see what wisdom you have to offer.
Right. If I can draw you back round this way, that's been very productive. It's kind of been exponential. The further you've gone on, the more that's come to mind, which often proves the case. Just going to really explain a few of the little areas that we've grouped them in, because I think each of the different groups has come up with similar ideas, but there's some really interesting challenges here. Stuart's just putting together the opportunities. So we'll start on this side here. Age, size, aging congregations, small congregations, difficult facilities, where are we going to get people? And then under that side there is also like questions about volunteers, and we have also a question here about thinking about the future, falling in numbers and that lack of good new members in Sunday school. So a whole bunch of challenges on that side. On this side we have building fabric, old buildings, how do we get rid of or deal with the number of chapels we've got, or churches, questions about where those churches are located, do they have the facilities that people would expect now? We've got a lot of questions about one area, Dufton, so I don't know who's from Dufton, but there's quite a good set of questions there. It's quite a detailed analysis of the question of what you do, given you've got these resources in Dufton, but they're not really where you want them. So that probably brings us to another one. Then we've got a question about the lack of clergy, the amount of ministry and the costs. We've got a shortage of leaders. Now we've taken that as an overall leadership issue. So as different people to lead different areas, church life. We've also got lack of funds to support the ministry, and questions about expenditure and matching income to expenditure. So those are all about how we balance what we're doing. But there is a recognition that we're short of resources and there are fewer things going on. We have here a couple of very interesting questions about society. Has society changed? Is there a lack of faith in society? And there are a lot of alternative activities when we choose to have our main services on Sunday. When I was in Manchester, we actually started one on a Thursday evening, 6:30 to 7:15, full communion aimed at kids, a big assembly. We went from 20 to 120 in 2.5 years. And that was just because it was a time when they could come. Involve, attract people. How do we get them over the threshold? What's the way of drawing them in? How do we get hold of the prodigals? Somebody's mentioned the question about a church or a chapel that used to have a youth club, but there isn't one now. There isn't a chapel there now. How do we replace that? How do we connect to seekers? And there's a question about getting people involved in what's going on, and that commitment is a bit different. And then finally, I want to pick up on this one here, this strand, how we're going to work out what buildings we need. It's a big challenge, isn't it? Because somebody else wrote, we're truly attached to our buildings. How easy would it be to sell one or to let it move on to something else and actually move ourselves to the place where God says is the best place for us to work in ministry? So a whole bunch of things on here. As you can see, you've all provided and supplied things, but also you've come up with some great opportunities. I'm going to let Stuart have a word about that.
Yes, thank you. So some very interesting things. I mean, I'm going to start actually with the buildings. So there's a counter side to the problem of buildings, which is that they are also opportunities. They're an amazing, visible, constant presence in our local areas. And so there are opportunities for them to be used for our local communities in all sorts of ways. But also the caution that we do need a mission strategy that somehow encompasses all of our buildings. There are quite a few things focusing on young people and schools, particularly the church schools in our area. But actually, there's all of our schools are a fantastic area. Stephen's already spoken about that. I could share similar stories of how schools is a terrific way to engage with the young. And finding, we have to be quite creative about how we involve them in church, but there are ways we can do that. And likewise, as they're beginning to get a bit older, the hatching, matching and dispatching side, our weddings, we're working very hard at trying to encourage young people to come and get married in church, and that's proving to be a really, really good way of connecting with people, and then you have them when they come back for christenings and so forth. So that's great. And one thing I would say is young people do seem to be a lot more interested in the Christian faith than my generation was. We were all sort of, rebels, but the young people are actually far more interesting. So that really is an opportunity. There's associated with that the people we've got in church. So we've got some important people working in NISCU and the Network Youth Church, and some very gifted people around our churches. We've got a lot of people engaged in lay mission, people interested in doing pioneering work, and the opportunity to raise up more lay pioneers and encourage them in what they're gifted and called to do, and help them and resource them. There are social opportunities, things like churches together, things like the wellbeing cafes that we've started up fairly recently, after school clubs, and using churches for other events. And also some of the sort of public services that we hold. Remembrance Day is an obvious one, but at times of major change in the life of the nation, or points of great crisis, we're in a fantastic position to reach out to our communities and provide something really positive and hopeful. And even wider, looking at the sort of wider world today, we've already done a great deal, I think, to start speaking into the context of COVID. Our online presence that didn't exist 18 months ago has really taken off. And also the climate issue, which is massive, particularly concerning, is a particularly big issue among the young, but it's frankly an issue that faces us all, and that's something that we can do something about, or at least make a significant difference in. And then, of course, there's money, a recognition that we do need a financial strategy, but that actually money is a resource and an opportunity. And if we have a decent strategy and we are clever about how we handle our money, then it does help to resource all of these opportunities. So we're very grateful for all of that. There's a lot of common themes emerging here. We are going to take all of this back into our thinking and our feedback. But for now, for the rest of the evening, we're going to focus specifically on the money issue. And I'm going to hand over to Sue to give us a little bit of background and context of the specific challenges we're facing here.
Thank you. Conscious of the time. Okay. So yeah, we're now focusing in on the cash. What I thought would be useful, and you may already be aware of this, but I thought it would just help to set a context, really, seeing that the workshop is about money. The way Stephen is going to speak briefly in a moment about the Methodist circuit and how it operates. Sorry, is it because I'm so little? Sorry. But I'm just going to talk about the deanery at the moment, the Anglican side of things, and the way we raise our funds primarily is from the parish offer. So that's kind and generous people giving money. And no surprise really, 2009, the amount that came into the Appleby Deanery was over £300,000. Bearing in mind a stipend clergy is at the moment around 61,000, not just salary, that's got all sorts of other things built into it. The parish offer 2020, pre-COVID, dropped to 266. I've got a diocesan board finance meeting on Wednesday, and I know our current offer for 2022 in the Appleby area is going to be around the 230 mark. It's quite a drop. So I guess we have to ask ourselves, church is getting smaller. What does that mean? Is church growing but we're just getting less money and we're doing everything for free? Or is it going to have an impact on how we can operate in terms of our clergy numbers? What I think tonight and all the workshops are trying to really get the message across is that the message is very clear from the diocese. It's saying, locally, please can you make sure you cover your costs as much as possible. That's what we need you to do. And whilst people might think, well, that's all very well, but actually it empowers us, because if we're knowing what money we've got locally and what money we can lever in locally, then we are informed and can make decisions. So we have that power then to say, actually, we would like. Our priorities for next year is this. We don't want that anymore, etc. So whilst it can feel quite disempowering as seeing the money dwindling down, by knowing what situation we're in, we're able to really plan and have a much more realistic view of things rather than feeling disempowered and things being done unto us, which sometimes it does feel like that, doesn't it? So that's the deanery. Stephen, would you be happy to just share briefly regards to the Methodists?
Thanks, Vic. So the Methodist circuit operates slightly differently to your parish shares in that all the churches make an assessment and that is handed in centrally to the circuit, and that goes on, which means we actually operate as a funded unit altogether. Coronavirus has made some changes. It's accelerated some changes in our churches. We might well have to have a couple of churches that won't survive now because of what coronavirus has done to the age of people. Before they were 88 and going out 5 times a week, now they're 88 and they stay at home. It's just one of those things that seems to have happened in coronavirus. But equally, we've gone outside the churches, and that's been amazing because the things we've done to connect with people has made a big difference. We're doing well at the moment in terms of finance in some churches. Some of the churches last year didn't actually lose anything. They actually balanced their books. I don't know quite how that worked, but it did. Others have had quite a significant fall in what they've got. We're seeking God's way forward. And if you take Crosby Ravensworth, we've mentioned that already, sadly the church is going to close there. We'll get a one-off input of funds, but that's not really what we want to do. What we want to do is be offering a mission, a outreach in that place. So we're looking there at having a class of Methodists join the Anglicans in the Anglican Church. And that will be a way forward. It might be different at one of the other places in our circuit. But what we are seeing is there are at least 1 or 2 churches already we know we won't be getting the assessment from, and that will, over this year, fundamentally change because some of the churches in our circuit will not be getting the kind of income they had before because numbers have dropped. Now, it may not be the case for you, but for us that will be a case, and we've got to work out our own way of doing our assessment and working out where we are with it. But I reckon there'll be quite a rapid change over the next 2 to 3 years because we're also required to look at having the trustee bodies enlarged. So that might mean that we've got to do something collective like take 2 or 3 churches and make them into a single church in terms of management, but in 3 different places or just 2 places in the future. That's something we've got to look at quite quickly. So I hope that helps you think it through. The only other thing we do, which is just to annoy everybody else, is our financial year starts on September the 1st. So I think you start on January the 1st, don't you? Yeah, which is like most of the... And of course, the world actually operates on April the 5th. Just, yeah. So things to think about finance.
Okay, super. Thank you. Okay, guys, it's now back over to you. You'll notice on your small handout that there's another discussion area. And what we'd like you to do, perhaps in the same groups that you were previously, and just have, because of the time, if you have about 5 minutes or so, just thinking about the fact that we've very quickly, Stephen and myself, outlined that funds for our mission and ministry are reducing. The hard figures show that. So, rather than to be downhearted, it's about thinking about what might we do to offset this decline. So I'll give you 5 minutes to chew it over with your neighbours, and then what we'd like to do, we'll just capture it, open session, and we'll record it on a flip chart. So if you could pick somebody in your group that's happy just to speak out, that would be fantastic. Is everybody okay with that, just for 5 minutes, just thinking about what we might do to offset the decline? So keep on thinking, and any more ideas, just get them fed through. We've captured, Stephen will have captured all of those. I'm now going to hand you over to Stuart, who's going to talk a little bit more about the CIO itself.
Yes, thank you. Just one point of clarification. Thank you all for some really interesting creative things you've been coming up with. One of the issues we have on the Anglican side is that when we sell our buildings, the money doesn't go to us. It goes centrally to the Church of England, to the Church Commissioners. So that's one of the kind of, again, just part of the complexity in all of that. I'm sure in the end it comes back and does some good, but it's, yeah. So now, talking of silly ideas, we're going to open up this idea that we've had here to get your feedback on it, and it's this idea of the CIO. So, Andrew, if we could have the next slide there. I've identified on here what we thought were the key needs that we were addressing here by opening up this idea of setting up a CIO, a charitable incorporated organisation. The first is the point that John made about the need to fund the local church. Certainly on the Anglican side, all of the systems that we've got are kind of centrally focused. And so a lot of the decision making goes out of our hands. It's hard to control our costs. There's no clear link between what we give, in our case to the diocese, and what we get back in the local church. And I think that's been one of the biggest reasons why we've seen the erosion of giving, particularly among people who don't go to church. Because actually, when I started in ministry, there was still an awful lot of people in the community who never came to church, but would still give regularly to the church. And I think it's that lack of transparency between what they give and how that resources the local church has been one of the biggest factors in people losing confidence. So having something that we own and control locally, that we set the priorities, and where we are accountable to one another for what we spend, I think is one of the key things. And I have to say, in all of this, although I'm suggesting this isn't going to be the answer to all of our problems, but I think it is addressing some of our key issues. So I think this does help to address that. I think also one of the things that we're missing as we're trying to do more things together, particularly across the denominations, but also between different congregations, is that anything we do requires a budget. We need to finance it, and there is no joint way of financing things that is clear and transparent. So the things that we have managed to do together, we've sort of cobbled together. The Methodist Church has been generous by paying for this, and the Anglican Church has been generous by paying for that. But there's no place where we can actually put our funds together, create a budget, and be clear and transparent about how we're financing our joint activities together. And one of the best examples of that is the Network Youth Church, where the way that works at the moment, we've got a fantastic Network Youth Church minister. She's here tonight, she's Rachel, and she does wonderful work, but she has no budget for her work. So she simply has to claim everything she does through her expenses. So at the beginning of the year, we kind of try and work out what her expenses are going to be. We claim it in through the deanery levy, and at the end of the year, if she's been more successful than we expected her to be, she's in trouble because we haven't got the money to pay for it. Now, I think we should be saying to her, here's a budget, Rachel. We want you to spend that on reaching the youth of our area and their families. We don't want you to come back until you've spent it all on something useful in reaching the young people, rather than having her scrabbling around. So some way of being able to budget that in advance and give her a pot of money and say, that's what you've got to spend in doing your fantastic work. We looked also at we mentioned the need for new sources of income, and there are grants available out there. But again, Rachel's a very good example to me. She regularly comes to me and says, there's a grant for this, Stuart, can I apply for it? And I say, no, you can't. Because first of all, we haven't got a bank account. Secondly, we've got no incorporation documents or policies. And thirdly, the mission community doesn't actually exist outside of our imaginations. There is no body that can apply for a grant. So we have found some creative ways of getting hold of some of this money, but an awful lot of opportunities have gone by, and the ones we have managed to get it is extraordinarily difficult to work it. And then this last point, which is Anglican only, which is about how we fund our local parish ministry and particularly our clergy. We're going to look more at that in workshop 3 when we're talking about the budgets. But the CIO is part of the way that we're looking at that. Andrew, if we could move on to the next point. So Rachel is employed by the diocese and paid for by the Anglican deanery, her salary is, and then her activities we kind of jointly fund together in, taking turn about, as it were. Yeah. So yes, thank you. So I think the key points I want to make really about what we're not trying to do with the CIO. The first thing is we're not trying to replace local churches, their funds or their structures. So your local church will still be governed by your church council or your PCC. You'll still have your own money. You'll still be responsible for your own things like your own buildings and your own churchyards and your own local activities. So we're not trying to replace that. What we're trying to do is to fill the gap of how we have a common life together. Secondly, this is not about centralisation. This is not about sending funds off somewhere else or by taking things away from the local church. It's about finding a mechanism that allows us to cooperate with each other, with keeping the focus very much on the local area, us making local decisions as local people, but doing it together. Thirdly, it's about not trying to do everything. So there were some fantastic ideas about how we might reach walkers and how we might apply for grants for our buildings. I think that will still remain something that is very much in the hands of the local church. But we are looking at doing specific things that relate to the life of the mission community. And the other key point is that although I think we are ahead in our thinking of, well, I think all of the other mission communities in Cumbria, we have the full support of the Strategic Development Group, which is the ecumenical group that's overseeing mission communities, and also the Diocesan Board of Finance, who have very kindly agreed, if we do decide to go ahead with the CIO, to fund the initial startup costs, which somewhere between sort of £7,000 and £10,000. They are that keen on this and are looking very closely at whether it might be a model for the rest of the county as well. So we do have support for this if we decide to go through it. But I suppose the big question then is why? Why is CIO? So Andrew, if you could have the next slide. There are various problems, legal problems, with charities giving money to other charities, and in particular between the Anglican and Methodist churches. That's quite tricky. You wouldn't think it would be, but it is. There's also the emotional issue about our money. What constitutes our money. So one of the key advantages of a CIO is that it's a separate charity. We all have a stake in it. We all have, as it were, ownership in it. But it's neither Anglican nor Methodist. It's just us all together. So that in itself is quite a key point. So we're not relying on the Methodist Church giving the Anglican Church money or vice versa. It's got its own identity. And because legally it has its own identity, it can then apply for grants, it can open a bank account, it can have a constitution, it can have all the necessary policy documents that we need to be able to apply for grants and to show to external bodies who we are, what we're about and what we do. we can fundraise and receive donations for specific missional events. So one example is 2 or 3 years ago, we had an event called Moving Mountains that we were all involved with. We all organised various things, and there was a certain amount of cost involved in room hire and putting on events, and there was no way of actually putting that together into some kind of budget, or to encourage people to give towards the things that we were doing. Another example is with the Network Youth Church. There are lots of people who, again, trying to sort of offer Rachel money to say, oh, can I give you a donation for all the wonderful work you're doing? And again, the answer is, well, it's a bit complicated. And again, most of the clergy in the room will have had people wanting to give money to the mission community, and we have to turn it away because there's nothing to give it to. So we can, this way we can fundraise for specific missional events or for things that we're doing that are really good, like the wellbeing cafes and that sort of thing. We can receive donations and we can receive gift aid on those donations. We can also enter into contracts and partnerships. So one of the things that we've discovered is that although it's very difficult to get money as a religious organisation, you can partner very cleverly with secular organisations that are doing exactly the same work, and they get the money. So we recently entered into a partnership for youth work with the through Sue's with other business, the Oakley Trust. And because they were a secular youth work, the fact that we were a partner with them didn't put off the funders. They were able to get the funding to do something we would have been doing anyway and funding ourselves. And there are similar opportunities with things for pastoral work. A lot of the pastoral work we do is doing just just being neighbourly in the community. It's not necessarily particularly religious, and there are other organisations that want to do it, and there are places wanting to give money to local people to do things like visiting the sick, looking after the elderly, running a bereavement group, all of that sort of thing. And it would make so much more sense if we were simply partnering with other organisations trying to do the same thing. We increase the number of volunteers we have, and we attract, again, grants that are currently unavailable to us. But we can only do that if we exist, if we are a body. We can go to somebody and say, this is who we are, we can enter into a partnership with you, and we can support your application for a grant. The other thing about a CIO is it's very hard to give very clear legal representation to so many different churches spread across such a wide area. But if we set up a CIO, rather like any company, you've got a board of directors who run the thing, and you've got a group of shareholders who own the thing. And we can set it up so that all of our local churches and chapels are effectively shareholders in the CIO, and that gives you full local representation. Everybody has a stake in this. As rural dean, you can come along to Deanery Synod and you can express your view, but I don't have to do what you tell me to do. But as a member of a CIO, you come along and you tell me what to do. I have to do it legally. So you actually have more power and stake as a member of a CIO than you do as, for example, a Deanery Synod rep. I'm using an Anglican example, but I'm sure it's a similar situation. Actually, I think Methodist chapels have slightly more power in a circuit meeting than Anglican churches do in a Deanery Synod meeting, but yeah. And then there's the question of how we set our own priorities and budgets and spending. That's quite hard to control our costs, as we've discovered, but it does give us an opportunity to do that, and we're going to look at that more in Roadshow 3. And because of the legal requirements of a CIO, the way that we operate within charity law, it's really important that we are very transparent with you about what we've done with the money that we've together raised. So there's some very specific bits of reporting that are required back to our members that I think will help, again, to address that point that John raised about people needing to know that their money has benefited their local area. And that's precisely what we'd have to tell you every year. Much more rigorous than we have to at the moment under church law. So that's a sort of a number of reasons why we're suggesting a CIO. So the way that it works, just as a reminder, is it's got its own legal identity. It's a bit like a sort of limited company, but it's designed for small local charities. There'd be a group of people who kind of ran it on a day-to-day basis, a bit like a board of directors, and then there'd be a group of stakeholders, shareholders, known as members, which would be every church in the local area, who'd have a real stake in what's happening. They'd be involved in setting our priorities. They'd be involved in the activities that we do. And most importantly, we would then be accountable back to the local churches for everything that we've chosen to do together. So there's a moment now for questions. We'll move on to the next slide, which just says questions. We are going to have a discussion about this in a moment for you to, give us back your ideas. So hold on to those thoughts for a moment. But if there are any questions of clarification that you need to enable you to have that conversation, now's your time to stick your hand up. Yeah, thank you. Can I just take the second point? And Sue, I wonder if you would maybe answer the first point in just a second.
Yeah.
So just on the second point, I think you're right. I think there's a job of sort of interpretation and presentation to be done from us as ZIO. But the really important thing is not just what you report back to the Charities Commission and file as your sort of company accounts, as it were. It's what you report back to the members. And it's the fact that you are required to be accountable to your members, and that in effect would require us to be really clear and transparent with all of you what we've done with the money that you've paid into that. Sue, do you want to just give an answer about the two different types of CIA?
Yeah, David's absolutely right, and it's in the paper, the Resourcing Mission Community paper. We've sought legal advice. There is a foundation model and an association model, and we would be advocating the more transparent version rather than the one that's more of a closed shop. So you're absolutely right, David, there are two models, and they're within your paper, and we'll be going over that more in Roadshow 4.
Yeah, we will. Clive.
Hang on, Clive.
Oh, sorry, microphone coming your way.
This is just a random thought that, because of your excellent presentation, Stuart, that you mentioned Renew Wellbeing cafes, which I've been supportive of on the steering group, etc. And that steering group for that specific mission initiative has formed itself into a body that means it does attract funding, and it's attracted funding for all sorts of things. So I do wonder whether there is room in this world that we're entering to recognise that some things need to have their own independent identity, and to be supportive of that, rather than claiming all things coming under a single CIO or single thing. Because I think the wonderful thing about the Renew Wellbeing is it's really got the energy, I guess, in terms of what the question that was just posed, of a very committed group of trustees who are giving strong leadership and working together to facilitate. So, I mean, I think I'm still grappling with this. How do we throw away the potential of local energy and initiatives?
Yeah. Thank you.
I think to answer that question, I think Renew Wellbeing is a success. I just think we have to be careful about accountability. If Renew Wellbeing is seen as a church project, then people giving money to that project will want to know that their funds are, there's accounts and things are being done appropriately, which I'm sure they are. So I think it's about empowering and giving people independence, absolutely, but the protection of the accountability and transparency that we talked about. Question here.
Yes, thank you. That's a really important question. So it's us. I mean, I think actually it's more akin to the volunteering group. So we're setting the objectives of the things we want to do together. and looking at how we've fundraised from that. So it may be from individual donations, it may be from people contributing things, or churches agreeing that we're going to commit to funding this project, and then there's the grants that we might apply for the specific things that we want to do. So, I mean, essentially, we set the objectives, we raise the funds, we spend the funds, and then we report back as to what we've done. Well, within the Anglican side, yes, the CIO would be a vehicle by which we could coordinate our parish offers as well. Well, we'll look at that more in Roadshow 3, but in essence, yes, but only to pay for our clergy. So what we would be doing there is working out what clergy cover we want, and then how we fund that. Now, ultimately, it goes to the diocese because the diocese pays the clergy, but that's just a simple exchange. But in the shorter term, it's about us deciding what clergy we want and how we're going to fund it. And that money can also go through the CIO, so that we've got a more locally coordinated way of deciding what clergy we want and how we want to pay for it. No, I mean that's true. So just in case anyone didn't catch that, I mean, at the moment we're struggling to pay for the clergy we've got. We're not likely to have more spare money. I think that's exactly true. I think what the CIO does is two things. Firstly, it will allow us to make more coordinated decisions about the clergy that we have in the area and how we're going to fund that fairly between the different churches. And the second thing is, I think at the moment we're trying to do everything through what people are giving to church on the plate, the general funds of the church. The CIO will take some of the pressure off that by allowing us to fund specific projects outside of the money that goes into the plate, either by attracting specific donations or applying for grants. So that's sort of there are two ways in which the CIO begins to address that question, which isn't going to go away otherwise. Yeah, thank you. I mean, that's
a really good point.
That is a very good point,
yeah,
which we will capture. I think, again, that comes back to what we're going to be looking at in Roadshow 4 about how we organise ourselves, because the communication point is tremendously important. We're obviously not going to bottom all of these issues out in one night, which is why we've got 4 roadshows. So So, I mean, without giving too much away for Roadshow 4, but maybe just as a little tantalizer for you, I mean, one of the issues we have is we've got an awful lot of meetings in church, and yet we don't seem to be terribly effective at communicating, despite all these meetings. So how do we make sure that we actually take decisions together? How do we make sure that we really do hear from the ground? How do we make sure that it is actually us ourselves making all the key decisions together, without creating a whole load of other meetings and another layer of governance? And those are precisely the issues that we're going to be looking at in Roadshow 4, because there's quite a lot to unpack in relation to that. But I do agree that it's completely key to all of this. Shall we just, we are at 9 o'clock. If people do need to leave, I understand. But having got this far, it would be a shame if we didn't have a chance to chat and amongst us, back in our little groups, and then hear some more observations from the floor at large. So we'll give you sort of 5 minutes to chat in your groups. If people do need to go, then please do. But have 5 minutes quickly now just to chat amongst your neighbours, and we'll hear back from folk. So two points there. So in terms of the the parish offer, again, this is an Anglican thing rather than a Methodist thing, because the Methodists already have a similar equivalent system through circuit funds, and the Anglicans don't. There are two things there. First of all, that the diocese itself is moving away from parish offer to mission community offer. So you won't be able to do individual parish offers fairly soon, because the diocese will require us to do a mission community offer. So how we do that, how we coordinate that, is something we're going to have to think through. So the CIO is a vehicle in which we could do that and have those conversations and make sure that so that we're at least talking to each other before we do that. So that's the first thing to say in relation to the parish offer. In relation to the events, we're not looking to fund individual church events through the CIO. What we're looking at is how we fund the coordinated events that we do as a mission community. So the Network Youth Church is the one thing that we've got already established, but there will be other sort of pioneering event initiatives, other mission initiatives, other things that we want to do together to start capitalizing on some of these opportunities and addressing some of our challenges. And I think in terms of, this goes to the nature of mission communities as a whole, because most of the problems that we're facing are bigger than any of us individually can solve, or any of our individual churches can solve. And that's why it's so important that we come together to start addressing some of those issues. If we all just stay in our own little groups and our own little limited resources, we'll all go down one by one and there won't be anything left. But we have an opportunity now to come together and to address our problems together. And tonight's just the very, very beginning of that process. But when we do come together, all sorts of ideas emerge, all sorts of energy emerges, and it's funny how new sources of income follow ideas, because in the charity sector, which we effectively are, money follows vision. And if we, as the people of God, have a vibrant vision that we ourselves have set, that we ourselves are engaged in, the resources will begin to follow, both financially and in terms of human resources as well. Stephen.
One of the things we have in the Methodist circuit is we have what's called an assessment, and every church pays its assessment, and the circuit meeting sets the assessment for the churches. They have no right to say no, and that's the first call on any money they have. And that pays for circuit various things. It gives a little bit to the district, the equivalent to the diocese. And it also puts funds, a small amount of funds, into national. But it is something that's set. And so we have a mechanism of joining together and doing things together through our assessment and paying above assessment that allows us to do things collectively.
Yeah, that's not for now anyway, and that's just to do with Methodist Church law at the moment. But we are working on that. But we know we can do it straight away with the Anglican side, and that we're going to effectively have to because of the way that the diocese is organising things. I can see your point, Judith, in terms of how it plays out. If it's only the Anglican side that are funding their ministry through the CIO and the Methodist isn't, it will look lopsided. In reality, it's not, because actually our joint initiatives together we're funding equally and fairly. So there are two sides to what we're trying to do with the CIO finances. There's the how we manage to pay for our clergy, and then there's the how we fund our mission, joint mission together. And I suppose tonight we're looking specifically mostly at the joint mission together. Roadshow 3 will look a little bit more at how we fund the clergy side. But in terms of the activities that we're doing together that will be played out in our local communities, they will be completely, fairly and jointly funded between us. But you're right about the communication point, and I think that's a huge challenge we have anyway. I mean, and it's the nature of our area. It's the fact that there are so many different groups involved. It is a massive challenge. Thank you. That's really helpful. I mean, part of the reason we've shied away from the details, we want not to nail everything down before we talk to you. But I do hear the point that actually a little bit more clarity, or at least a worked example, would help you to get your heads around it more clearly. So
there's a governance structure example in the paper that gives you a suggestion of how it might operate. But as Stuart said, you don't want it to be a done deal. It's a yeah. So there is an example in there.
Okay.
The only other thing I'd say, Jill, being putting my little halo on, it's all God's money.
Well, yeah.
All.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's late and we're very grateful. This is not your last opportunity to feedback. There'll be lots of opportunities to feedback, and including, you'll see we've put Joyce Keatley's email there to receive bits of feedback. She'll help to collate the feedback. So please keep thinking about it. Please keep the conversation going, and please keep talking to us. We're going to just finish now with, well, first of all, a reminder of the next roadshows. That's it. Yes, and what happens now is there's going to be 3 more roadshows, an opportunity to discuss with your churches, encourage people who weren't here tonight to have a look at the recording of it on YouTube. Feedback to Joyce that her email is on the piece of paper that you've got, not being broadcast on YouTube. And then we'll be collating all of that feedback and making some decisions by the time we get to our November meetings in the Synod and the circuit. So there's opportunity to keep the engagement going over the next couple of months on this, and we will take back what you've said tonight. We're going to finish with the grace, I think, and Stephen, you're going to lead us in that.
Okay, just a moment of stillness in all of this. Feels very much like the world at the moment, doesn't it? So many things going on, and people say it's not new, it's going to be different. Faithful God, you are with us all at the time. We thank you for your grace and love to us, and Father, pray that you'd engender trust and unity, but also good communication, Lord. We would listen carefully, but also speak carefully in these things. Thank you for each and every one who's been here tonight, those who are already on the way home, and those who watch it on the Mission Community website. We pray, Lord, you bless us now. Help us to see your opportunities, be moved by your Spirit, and live and work to your glory. So we share the words of the grace. The grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, and the love of God, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us all evermore. Amen.